Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we are wrapping up our draft coverage a little bit late. Both Drew and I were sick last week, so we didn't get to do that last week. But the main emphasis on the show here this week will be looking at the schedule. We will be making bold predictions, rash assertions, and all kinds of other and fake analysis of a schedule that really we don't know a whole lot about. To be quite honest with you, because we don't know a lot about these teams just yet. But we're going to overreact, and we're going to try to pinpoint where the Vikings are going to land in the first 17-game season in NFL history. So that's the goal of today's show. Let's jump right into it then, huh? So as far as the draft is concerned, when we last spoke with you guys, we talked about Christian Darrisaw and Kellen Mond. We wrapped that whole thing up, for at least for the time being. Let's take a look at the guys that we didn't touch on. We'll give some kind of brief thoughts on each one of them, or if you have anything special, Drew, feel free to jump in. But this group includes Chad Surratt from North Carolina, Wyatt Davis, Patrick Jones II. I'm going to butcher this running back's last name so many times over the course, if I have to say it often. Kene Nwangu, Cameron Bynum, Janarius Robinson, Emir Smith-Marset, Zach Davidson, and Jalen Twyman is the rest of your 2021 class here. Of that group, is there anyone that stands out to you that you think is not just going to make the roster this year? I think probably 65-70% of these guys are going to make the roster. Is there anyone that you think is going to do something with those middle round selections this first year in the NFL?
I think Janarius Robinson has, I think, the best chance to make a real solid contribution, just because I think the Vikings needed to address edge in this draft quite a bit, and I think he's got the size and he's got the athleticism, I think, to maybe make that impact. Some of the technique stuff is still a bit behind, but I think that was a big part for me, was addressing edge. And so I think, for as much as I really like what the Vikings did in the draft, they got, if they're kind of their top picks, they addressed quarterback, they went in and got a couple of linemen that could start this year. But I think the sort of downside was that they didn't address edge. And so Janarius Robinson, to me, is the guy that is going to at least compete for sort of some spots, with your Weatherly and your other players there as well, DJ Wanham. There's going to be some competition there, I think, and I think Robinson has the potential to make that impact. The Vikings went after here a little bit of size, athleticism, and
Right.
then, they've had success in the past developing those type of players.
And another guy that'll be joining that group too is the third round pick, Patrick Jones. Little different player. I think Janarius Robinson, it's interesting that you think that a fourth round pick would have more more success immediately than a third round pick. The funny thing about Patrick Jones, I guess what makes that pick interesting, is that's the same slot or the same general area that the Vikings have selected Scott Crichton and Danielle Hunter. Two project players. One of them worked out.
Yeah, one worked out. Those are kind of the extremes of how a player can work out. Right? Yeah,
both were selected in that kind of that mid third round slot. Patrick Jones is just the latest edge rusher to be among that group. I think Janarius Robinson, kind of the mold of this player, is just more appealing. I like what I've read about Patrick Robinson. Sorry, there's too many names that I'm going through in my head right now. Between Patrick Jones and Janarius Robinson. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Patrick Jones to me is he's not as appealing physically, right? Janarius Robinson kind of has like an Everson Griffin feel. 6'5", 260. He's a big boy. As far as, Patrick Jones goes, it's more of kind of a physique. He's going to be a technical player. The stuff that I've seen about him, including, him being a bit of a film nut, watching everyone from Aaron Donald to Danielle Hunter, he's hopefully going to be playing snaps opposite of this year. I like that type of player as well, but when you just look at the physical stature, Robinson's probably more appealing, especially for rotational snaps immediately. I think that there's a case to be made that Jones has to add a little bit of weight, or at least some good weight, or he has to transition a little bit if he's going to be a pure 4-3 edge rusher, I think. Whereas Janarius Robinson, I think, could step in immediately. I'm with Drew on that. Obviously, Wyatt Davis is kind of the home run here in terms of appeasing fans, right? Interior offensive lineman, Ohio State, Big Ten. I mean, if there wasn't a Pat Elflein age in Vikings territory, this pick would look perfect, right? But I know that there's someone out there
a little PTSD about
right.
Ohio State interior offensive lineman. But why I think that there's a really high floor here, right? And if the worst case scenario is Pat Elflein, I feel like that's still. I mean,
That's
it
a
couldn't
better
be
starter
worse,
than
right? Because
Tony
the guy
Dozier, right?
started for a couple of years. He's still a starter technically in the NFL. And if you get that in your mid round pick, I mean, that's probably a net positive, all things considered. So, and yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, right? Wyatt Davis is going to come in. He's going to probably be, a favorite to land a starting job.
I was just gonna say to you, like like he has to screw up, right, to not
I
start,
think so. I
pretty much.
mean, I would consider, right, just because of how the situation at that spot right now. And then we talked about, I think they handled this brilliantly in terms of addressing the need without, uh, you know, using a high draft pick on the guard spot, right? I think the fear was Elijah Vera Tucker right away in the draft. And actually, the Vikings, traded out of that spot for the Jets to trade him there or to draft him there. So at 14, but I think the value for Wyatt Davis at 14 or at, in the third or later round pick is much higher than Vera Tucker at 14. So I like that a lot. And I think, I mean, he's going to be a good fit. I think he'll be, like I said, really high floor. And I like that about him.
Right. The Vikings really kind of followed, I think what a lot of us as fans wanted the script, just in terms of like, getting the optimal value at the right rounds, right? They got the third round guard. I really like the third round guard. I'm with Drew
Mm-hmm.
on that as well. I really like the third round quarterback. We already did that. I like the first round offensive tackle. I mean, I like, kind of mixing in edge rushers and playmakers in the middle rounds. Cameron Bynum's another one that we haven't talked about that I think looks really good on film as well. The cornerback, the one cornerback that Mike Zimmer got in this class. I think that you have to like the potential of Amir Smith-Marset, the Iowa wide receiver who can
Yeah.
do kick return, punt return, slot receiver, outside receiver, route, like weird route combinations, jet sweeps, etc. You have to like the playmaking ability there, and that's another middle round pick. Um, I mean, just as a whole, like the script that the Vikings followed, the one area where they kind of deviated from something that I would, I guess I would have preferred that they didn't take a running back in the fourth round. That's really splitting hairs. I mean, I understand that this kid that they got that I can't pronounce his name, Nwangu, from Iowa State. I understand that he's an amazing athlete and he could really do some damage to the NFL. I still don't like, in principle, drafting the running back there when you could just take a
See,
flyer.
I think I think there's more of a plan there could be the plan to use him more in a receiver type of role, even though that's kind of what Smith Marset could be as well. But I think I like the idea of bringing in two guys that are kind of similar in that role, in that way, where they have the return capabilities on special teams and just have game breaking ability with the ball in their hands. So now it's going to kind of be up then to Clint Kubiak to kind of get the ball in their hands and be creative about it. But I like that they're going that direction because that seems to be kind of how how NFL offenses are trending, right? It's more pass plays, but it's they're I guess shorter, quicker concepts that get the ball into the playmakers' hands, let them work a little bit. And so I like to see that the Vikings are kind of attacking that route with a couple of these guys. One listed as a running back, but I think there's the potential for him to do more than just a standard traditional running back role.
I think my issue more than anything is just that the snaps that you're theoretically replacing, if he is playing running back, right, is you're replacing Mike Boone's snaps, right? Like
Sure.
Dalvin Cook is your obvious starter. Alexander Madison has shown that he could be, potential starter in the NFL and has certainly earned that role as his backup. That's my only issue there. Again, I'm splitting hairs. It's the fourth round. Like, I mean, who really cares? Honestly, I don't. I'm giving you something that kind of was against the grain in terms of what I think most of us would like to see the Vikings do. But again, you can never,
You're gonna have to manufacture
idea.
touches probably, but I think it's one of those where I mean, that's what you want at this part of the draft, right? You want the high ceiling, low floor, with the exception
right?
of
That's what I was going to say.
With the exception of filling a starting guard role, but anywhere else, really, you want the guy that has the volatility to be a really, really effective, like, superstar type game breaking player with the ball in his hands. But if it doesn't work out, due to Raw not being able to run routes or having some issues, whatever, maybe with vision. But I think that's what I like about the Vikings with this draft and this pick is volatility there, where it could be a superstar, awesome pick, and I like that chance, just the chance of that happening.
I should mention too that running backs do make great special teams players as well. So for that reason alone, this could be an amazing pick. If you get an athlete that's going to provide 4 years of service, good quality service on special teams, I mean, that's also worth a fourth round pick, regardless of whether he's listed as a running back or
Yeah.
cornerback, tight end, whatever. I don't care. Um, in terms of, kind of to wrap this up, is there anything that the Vikings did that either, kind of you wish they would have done? Like maybe you would have liked to have seen them go get a tight end, for example, something that they didn't do until the fifth round with Zach Davidson. I don't think that's a very exciting pick. Just stuff like that. Is there anything that the Vikings didn't do that you'd like to see them do? Or is this, just another quality draft from Rick Spielman that I guess we'll see in a couple of years how it truly pans out?
Well, I guess the one knock, and now again, I could be wrong about this. I think this is the same popular knock with the Danielle Hunter pick, but it seemed like a bit of a reach for Surratt, for Chaz Surratt. And again, I hope he listens to this, or he's motivated by that and makes me wrong. I would love to be wrong, but that's just the first thought I have. And again, I if you've seen the film, now again, this is maybe not a fair comparison, but if you've seen the film that Dara against UNC, that's Hilarious. What I'm going back to, and I know that's very ingrained into my mind. But of course, maybe the Vikings scouting department saw something a little bit different.
It's weird that it's not ingrained in their mind.
Yeah, I know that's the thing that maybe there's something else going on, but it just seems like a bit of a reach for him. But hey, maybe I'm proven wrong here.
He looks like a great athlete on paper, just in terms of measurables, right? A lot of these guys do it. Kind of, I was kind of running through the mock draftables just to see, if
while I was Surratt, it wasn't about athleticism really. It's just about like kind of being in the wrong spot, where he, quite often it seemed like, and then at the same time too with the Darasaw, you could see Darasaw get the leverage advantage on seemingly every snap. So just things like that. But I mean, who knows? Again, maybe could be proven wrong here in camp and in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't have a whole lot of faith in Chaz either. I think it's hilarious that his name's Chaz first and foremost. That's different for me in terms of an NFL player. But I wish all these guys the best. I don't see like a bona fide bust candidate, right? And I know that a lot of these guys will be busts. If you consider a late round pick to be a bust, whether regardless, whatever your standard is, there probably will only be 3 or 4 of these guys remaining on the team's roster in 3 or 4 years. That's just kind of how the NFL draft typically works. And the good news is that I don't really see a obvious candidate this year. They didn't draft a long snapper. They didn't draft a kicker. They followed my rules, and so as a fan, you got to be happy about that. Again, Darasaw, Mod, really exciting picks, and I think some of these guys in the middle round here could potentially be interesting. I'm looking specifically I'm with you on Janarius Robinson, and then Smith Marset is who I'm kind of like honing in on as my.
I'm curious about him as well.
I like him a lot because I see some Maryland Stephon Diggs, right? Just in terms of like the playmaking ability. Now, not nearly the type of route runner, but he also has the ability to make an immediate impact on special teams. So,
he's going to have the opportunity anyway. I mean, he's going to have the opportunity just given where the Vikings' depth is at the position. There's going to be the opportunity. He's going to get the chance to be the number 3 receiver this year.
There's that too.
And so that'll be fun to watch in camp. He and BC and I guess Chad Beebe or whoever else is in that conversation. That'll be a fun one to watch.
Absolutely. And I know that the Vikings there's been rumors floated around about, D.D. Westbrook. But I don't think any of that is materialized. And so for that reason, you're right. Marset is Smith Marset, I should say, is your your wide receiver 3 to start the camp, probably. So that'll be interesting to see, and see how the Vikings choose to use him as well. So, all right. We'll talk more about these rookies and everyone else here as we get closer to camp. But for now, let's focus on the schedule release and just say some, absurd reactions that mean absolutely nothing. Just again, so much can happen between now and September 4th is it this year? That really what we say today just does not matter. It really doesn't. It's fun to pick apart the schedule. It's fun to try to envision what the Vikings might be able to do here. Given a full bill of health and everything around them, kind of the circumstantially doesn't change a whole lot. But just keep that in mind here. We're having fun by breaking down the schedule today. I'm not aiming for 100%, on this test here. This is a joke basically. So, all right, week 1, Vikings are scheduled to play against the Cincinnati Bengals on the road. Interesting for one reason. Mike Zimmer, of course, former defensive coordinator in Cincinnati. So a bit of a homecoming of sorts for him. Has had plenty of success in Minnesota after having years of success defensively in Cincinnati. So that's fun for him. We'll also potentially get the opportunity to see Joe Burrow in action. Jamar Chase is in his first game in the NFL, again, barring something crazy happening. Should be an interesting game. I don't know how, I think the Vikings in theory stack up pretty well against this team. And, I think we'd like to say this is a pretty easy win, but Joe, Joe Burrow's kind of an X factor here. Like he could come out really, really nice. And this Cincinnati Bengals team has been rebuilding for a couple of years now. I mean, who's to say this isn't the year that they start to put things together and the Vikings are their first victim? That's just kind of my initial thought.
That's exactly the part about why this is it's kind of absurd to even go in too far in depth this early. Is just because that type of thing development happens.
We don't even know if Burrow's going to start yet.
But I will say LSU fans will be tuned into this game. Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Danielle Hunter, Patrick Peterson. Like there's a lot of LSU, a lot of big LSU names in this one, so that'll be a fun one. But I very loose analysis. This is a great game for the Vikings to get sort of a good start to the season if you're into that momentum type of thing.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to give him a W here, just for the sake of for the
let's do it. Let's do our May 17th or May 18th schedule prediction here.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to give him a W. You're giving him a W as well. Second game here, we are staying on the road. So I just want to point out right away here, Vikings have high potential to screw up their season immediately based off of how their schedule unfolds kind of early on. They are at the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this is interesting for a number of different reasons. Of course, this is Kyler Murray's third year in the NFL. Looked like an MVP candidate early last season, really fell apart and showed major inconsistency towards the end of his year two campaign. Arizona ends up falling out of the playoffs. They become this extremely interesting team over the offseason, signing J.J. Watt, of course, making some of these other big moves to bring in A.J. Green. Larry Fitzgerald's going to stay there, so you have that interesting three generations of wide receiver, giving Murray every opportunity in the world here to succeed. The Vikings get them on their turf in week 2. Again, I think the Vikings are more established. They look better on paper, but this is another one of those teams like Cincinnati. I think they're a step in front of Cincinnati just in terms of being ready to compete, that you could end up getting blown out in this game if they show up week 1 and they're playing the type of football that we all believe Kyler Murray has the potential to play in the NFL.
So I'm giving the Vikings a loss here, first take, just because I don't like Murray's mobility, and I think that's continually giving the Vikings fits as mobile quarterback. So, but that'll be kind of a good test for this defense. Is this defense really back? Is the Mike Zimmer defense back? Because there's a lot of weapons on that Cardinal offense that can put up yards and points in a hurry, and so this will be a good test to kind of see right away. I know with Burrow and the Bengals, it might be their offensive line is still kind of rebuilding, and Burrow's still a young quarterback. So you might get kind of an easy, I guess I don't want to say easy game first, but manageable game first. But then the Cardinals, I think, will be a big test. I'm going to go with an L here.
Yeah, I'm going to give the Vikings a loss here too, just for the sake of, I think anything can happen in that game. I totally could see, Cliff Kingsbury coming out and laying an egg week 1, and this team looking like trash coming into week 2. I mean, that's on paper as well. Like that could easily happen. But for now, I'm going to bet on Murray being the MVP candidate as opposed to kind of the inconsistent roller coaster ride that he was last year, at least to start next year, where the Vikings are going to get them. Keep in mind, too, the Vikings won't have their full playbook implemented, too, so there'll be more freelancing. They're asking more young guys to do more. Cameron Dantzler specifically, week 2 is, that's the opportunity. That's something that, Kingsbury will attack. And, you'd like to think that an offensive-minded head coach could find a way to exploit that. So something to keep an eye on. All right. Week 3 here, Vikings return home, but they get the Seattle Seahawks. Again, do we have to play the Seahawks every year? First of all. Second of all,
at least it's at home.
At least it's at home. That's what I was going to say. I think the Vikings even said something funny about how they don't have to go to Seattle this year. The Seahawks, in fact, come to the Vikings. You get Russell Wilson returning, of course. He was not traded despite every weird rumor that went on this offseason. This is still a very good team. It's a very competitive team. I do think they're a more vulnerable team. So they're kind of like the opposite of the Cardinals, where the Cardinals are trending up, and I'm not really sure. It's more like for the Seahawks, it seems to me they're trending down, and I'm not really sure where they're at in terms of that trend down. Russell Wilson has never won less than 9 games in an NFL season. So he's never technically fallen apart completely. I don't expect Seattle to do that again this year. So they're going to be a quality team. I just don't know how quality of an opponent. I think the Vikings have a slight edge because they're playing at home. But again, this is one of those games where if Russ is cooking early, like he was last year.
Yeah, well, and the Vikings had him. The Vikings had them on the ropes last year. They convert 1 4th and inches or 4th and 1, and they actually win at Seattle after they had started off hot. I'm going to go with the Seahawks here, though. I mean, it's to me, it's simply about Russell Wilson making plays. He finds a way to get his team wins at the end of games. If it's close at all, Vikings find a way to get themselves into a lot of close games. And I just think Russ is the guy that has more of that it factor in those close games than Kirk does. So I'm going to go with Russ.
Yeah, I'm going to give the Vikings a loss here too. I think that, again, there's high potential for the Vikings to win this game as well, which is for the sake of kind of seeing the floor. I'm more interested in the floor than the ceiling when we're doing this, just because I think that that's a more effective analysis when you're talking about 7 months before, 6 months, 3 months, whatever. I can't do math. It doesn't matter.
Mentally, it's better for me just to have a floor, like a kind of, temper the expectations. And then if it goes well, great.
So we'll give the Vikings a loss there. We're standing at 1-2 here. That's September, by the way. So that's how quickly the season can kind of go off the rails. If you blow that one against Cincinnati, you have 2 tough games in a row. And then you stay at home. Again, you could easily start 0-4 here. You got Cleveland in week 4. Now, I know it's Cleveland. I know that's everyone's immediate reaction. They're also
it's not the same Browns.
It's not the same Browns. It's a homecoming for, your former offensive coordinator that effectively built
special teams coach too.
Special teams coach as well. There's a lot of narratives, a lot of storylines, but I think the most important one here is that as of right now, the Browns are considered a Super Bowl contender. The Vikings are not. I think the Browns might be favored on the road in Minnesota.
They will. They should be, and they will win this game. I think the Browns are a more well-rounded team, better roster all across the board. I think the one advantage the Vikings would have, oddly enough, in this game is that quarterback. So if Zimmer can coach, scheme up a couple of mistakes by Baker, I think Kirk can have a good enough game to keep the Vikings in it and in contention. But I think on paper, you got to go Browns.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the Browns will be favored here. And again, for the sake of argument, I'll stick with that. I'll say that this is a loss as well. Kevin Stefanski knows what to do in terms of breaking down the Vikings defense. I don't know if he can effectively implement a strategy, but he could definitely break it down. So I'm going to give him a significant edge there. Flip side to that, of course, that Mike Zimmer knows how to break down Kevin Stefanski's offense as well. It's kind of, a mentor versus mentee.
Browns roster though
they have more players. They have more playmakers.
If Baker could take a next step, they're going to be a really, really tough team to beat.
Absolutely.
I think they have a well-rounded roster there in Cleveland.
All right, so we are now in early October. Again, season can really go off the rails quick. The Vikings do have a saving blow here.
Detroit. It's always Detroit.
Week 5 stands with Detroit. You're playing at home. I think we can confidently, before even looking into this one a little bit.
You don't even have to discuss this one. It's Detroit still. Jared Goff is now they got worse at quarterback, which was like the only position that they had something to argue for in the NFL landscape. I don't think the Lions are a threat at all. I think they're going to be a 3-4 win team this year in a 17-game season.
Yeah, I think they'll be a little bit better than that. I'll give them a little bit more credit, but yeah, I do think they got worse at quarterback. They didn't really improve anywhere else. So I think overall it's fair to say that they're worse than last year. And the Vikings, for basically since they moved to the North Division, have had Detroit's number. So I don't think there's any reason to suggest that they wouldn't this year. So we'll go Detroit 2-3 here. Heading to week 6, you're at Carolina. So you're going back on the road here, but you do get about a bit of a fluff opponent, if you will. I'm not saying you can run this team over, but Matt Rule's in his second year as head coach. They are going to be working with a young quarterback, or, I don't know if it's going to be still a veteran quarterback, but they're either going to be working with a young quarterback or, I don't know. Sam Darnold is...
He's a guy. Nobody really knows because he was on the Jets.
Do we call him a young quarterback still?
I think I will say this though: playing quarterback for the Jets can probably age a guy quite a bit. So
I still think he's talented, but again, I don't think he's turning it around in 6 weeks in Carolina.
No, which is why I got the Vikings in this game. I think very lowly of the Panthers as well. Still, despite the fact that they almost beat the Vikings last year, defensively they're just too beat up. They're not quite there yet. They're building something. I think it'll be a really good roster in 3 to 4 years, but they're just not quite there yet. So I'm going to go with the Vikings in that one.
Yeah, I'll go with the Vikings as well. That brings us to 3-3 heading into the Vikings week 7 bye. I think at a 16-game slate, week 7 sounds like a great time to have a bye. 17-game slate, not as excited about that. But again, does it really matter? Probably not. Week 8 is really kind of when things start to become, you find out what type of team you have. That's also, the part of the calendar where you have to figure out what type of team you are. But the Vikings have 3 matchups in a row here. I think they could easily lose all 3 at the same time. If they're competing in all 3 of these games, this could be a very good season for the Vikings. You start week 8 at home, off your bye against Dallas. Again, narrative ties with Mike Zimmer there, going back to, Jerry Jones still kind of courting him now. To his days when he was a great defensive coordinator for the Cowboys. So there should be some fun from there. And I believe the last time the Vikings played there was the Prefer game where Zimmer couldn't even coach because he had the eye surgery.
They had there was a game more recently than that where
Was there?
They actually had NBC. It was the game where Rudolph had 2 touchdowns and Dak
right.
threw all over him, and the Vikings still won that game. But
right, another interesting narrative you bring up right there. Dak Prescott, is he the same guy? Who knows?
Yeah, I feel very weird about this game because I still don't think the Cowboys are any good, but I still like their roster is talented, right? And we don't really know with the whole Dak thing how his offense will be back again. To me, it's just I guess it's a toss up at home. I'm gonna take the Vikings cautiously. I think it's one of those though again where if Dak has a good game, they probably don't have much of a fighting chance. I guess.
I think the Cowboys are kind of in a similar spot to the Vikings, like just in terms of like.
That's true because both teams I think have overall they're good rosters. But I think there's depth issues for one, and I think they're in the same situation where a lot of guys returning from injury that kind of derailed the team's season last year. So there is that similarity there with both of them.
So here's my differentiator. Mike McCarthy is their head coach still. I'm going to give the Vikings the edge. So that pushes the Vikings to 4-3 heading into week 9. At the Baltimore Ravens, I think so. There were 2 games that the Vikings were had below 50% chance of winning. Their chance, the win probability is already in the middle of May was below 50%. One of them was this game here against Baltimore. I believe they're at like 42% chance of winning. Obviously, you're traveling on the road, East Coast. It's not, you're at the beginning of November. It's probably going to be a colder game. But you're dealing with Lamar Jackson, so we've already gone over how the Vikings, deal with mobile quarterbacks. That's a problem. You're also dealing with an enhanced roster. I think this team got better since last year, and they were already a very good team. I think that they're arguably a top 3 AFC team right now. I think I could say that pretty confidently. I think that this is probably one of the most dangerous games that the Vikings have because you could look at this one just on paper and be like, they have no shot because it's on the road against an
which
AFC
is exactly how
powerhouse.
I'm looking at it.
That's where I'm at too. So if you are the Vikings, I'm saying it's dangerous because you're not supposed to win this game. You're just not supposed to.
Right, and I don't see. I mean, I think the Ravens roster is very complete. They're getting more help now at receiver too, and so I think that offense will be even more high powered this year. And of course, defensively, they're solid as well. So I got the Ravens in this one, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's kind of a blowout.
Yeah. I'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how the Vikings play that game because again, we'll learn about the team in that one for sure. Week 10 here, right? You're still on the road. Now you're heading to Los Angeles. You're playing the Chargers. This is interesting because generally we'd make a joke or something about playing on the road against the Chargers, but I don't really know what the fan attendance is going to look like anywhere. So I can't really start there, can I? Justin Herbert.
They also have their stadium finally. So does that help them or does it hurt? Does it help the Vikings? Because there'll be more Vikings fans that can be there versus that little soccer stadium they were playing in. Nobody knows.
You got Justin Herbert coming off an amazing rookie year. Obviously, we have our opinions about the offensive rookie of the year trophy there, but still a very good player nonetheless. I think this roster's improved significantly as well. I thought they had the best draft pick in the first round period, getting Rashad Slater to fortify that offensive line where they were not in a good place. And now I think they have a better opportunity to succeed offensively. I think this one's dangerous. I think the Vikings might be losers on this one.
I think so too. I think the Chargers are the better bet here, just because. I think Herbert's going to take that next step. I think their roster on both sides is pretty darn good. Keenan Allen's going to be a problem for whoever tries to cover him. I'm taking the Chargers, assuming the Vikings and Mike Zimmer can't scheme up another turnover-happy game like last time they went to, the Chargers, and it was Phillip Rivers throwing them 7 interceptions or whatever it was. But I'll take the Chargers in that one.
All right, so we'll both go on Chargers then. That brings us to, let me see here.
It should be 4-5 at that point.
4-5 through week 10. So again, you're going to really find out who you are here because now you got Green Bay at home.
Which nobody, the Aaron Rodgers factor, nobody knows at this point.
Right.
I think odds are probably
Vikings have the odds here.
As
because
I
you're
think
playing at home.
so. I
No,
think
they do.
so. They do. Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting because and then of course the Rodgers thing makes it
Right.
a total kind of crapshoot here,
You
right?
can't even bet
I,
on the Packers right now, like in terms of their like season total for wins. They're not even
right
the odds
because
right
you
now.
can't. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna take the Vikings at home just because you know
I will too. Yeah.
I'm probably just gonna split with them just because there's so much uncertainty with the Rodgers thing. Like if Rodgers is gone, I like the Vikings to beat in both games. Um, but if the Rodgers is there, I really don't like the Vikings to win any of those games. So I'm gonna just take the Vikings at home for that sake, and we'll kind of redo this obviously when we know more about Rodgers.
Right. Week 12, you head to San Francisco. Still a good football team. I think they've come down to earth a little bit. You might have a rookie quarterback at this point too. I kind of expect you'll get Trey
Yeah.
Lance in 12, to be honest with you. I like the Vikings' chances here, especially if they are the team that we kind of think they are. They should beat this type of kind of rebuilding center. Nah, I don't want to call
See,
San Francisco a rebuild.
I think San
Rebuilding at the most
Francisco's
important
roster.
position.
I think San Francisco's roster is still really, really good. And if Kyle Shanahan is the miracle worker that we think he is at quarterback, I think the Niners will be a lot better than they were last year. And I'm going to take the Niners in this game. I think that roster, if it gets back healthy, you remember all the injuries they dealt with last year.
Right.
If they get healthy, I think they're going to be a really tough team. And that NFC West is going to be a loaded division. So I'm going to take the Niners in this one, actually.
Okay. Well, since we're evaluating floor, let's give them a loss there then. I personally would probably give I'd probably give the Vikings that one. Richard Sherman's not going to be back there. There's going to be some changes. I did really like. Did you guys see those like that weird highlight that showed up from that like undrafted cornerback? It was like Demondre. I don't remember his name, but anyways, it looked like they had a really nice looking cornerback that popped out of.
I'll be watching for him.
Yeah, keep that in mind. Week 13, you head to Detroit. I think we've kind of already done Detroit. So
our stance on the Lions is very well known. Vikings will be superior to them as long as for the next few years.
Right. We'll give them a win there. Then you travel back home. You got Pittsburgh at home. Pittsburgh's in an interesting spot because I don't think Roethlisberger is good, but the rest of the roster is great. I think the Vikings should win this one at home. If they're playing in Pittsburgh,
I think Pittsburgh is going to drop off quite a bit this year, part of that's due to Roethlisberger and some of those deficiencies kind of really showing up. Part of that is I think it's an age thing. I think there's a lot of guys that are going to drop off both sides of the ball. So I think the Vikings. I'm going to give them this game actually. I think Pittsburgh is, I think the 11-0 start last year was a big facade. I don't think they're that good. I think they're going to fall off dramatically. I think they're going to finish third or fourth in that AFC North division. So I'm going to take the Vikings.
Yep, I'll take the Vikings too.
I believe we're 7-6 at this point.
All right, so home stretch here. Last 4 games of the season, standing at 7-6. A lot can change, obviously, between 3 division games in the last month of the year, or the last month of games of the year, I should say. And then also the Rams. So starting with the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field, I'm just predisposed to a loss. You're playing on the road at Soldier Field.
Same. I mean, even last year it was the weirdest game. It was because Nick Foles couldn't complete a pass. I'm not taking the Vikings at Soldier Field until I'm convinced that little curse or that trend is over.
Right, me too. And I think that Justin Fields is going to struggle too, but I still think that Chicago's going to win. So we'll give the Vikings a loss there to bring them 7-7. Los Angeles Rams, potential Super Bowl contender. Of course, Matthew Stafford gets added over there. Upgrade at quarterback, of course. I think that this team probably has more talent than anyone else in the NFL, just in terms of like the high volume of top 100 players they have on their team. Probably a couple of top 10 players for sure. This is even at home. I think the Vikings are in trouble. I think this is you could probably write this one in as a loss if the Vikings aren't a lot better than I think they are.
Yeah, Vikings aren't winning this game. I also think very highly of the Rams. Obviously, I just can't imagine the Vikings' interior offensive line right now dealing with Aaron Donald. I just don't see how that is. I don't see how they can get around that in this game, and Kirk Cousins can stay upright. So I am going to give this one to the Rams.
Excellent. I am too. Last 2 weeks of the year, we've already covered both these teams. Green Bay on the road at Lambeau Field. I'm going to give the Vikings a loss there just because I think, like our analysis before, we gave the Vikings a win at home, not knowing what's happening with Rodgers. We'll give the Vikings a loss on the road. For what it's worth, odds have that's the Vikings' lowest win probability. I think it was 39% chance of victory on the road at Lambeau. So that's an easy one to pencil in as a loss. The last one here is at home against Chicago. Again, if the Vikings were playing earlier earlier in the year when they were playing on the road, the only reason I'm picking them there is because they're playing at Soldier.
Yeah.
I think that Fields and the Bears are going to struggle this year overall, so I can
Yep.
comfortably give the Vikings a win at home there. I think that brings us to what, 9-8 on the year?
I believe
Is that right? Or is
so.
it 8 and
It was
9?
7-6 when we started before those last 4 games. I think we gave them just one win down the stretch.
Yeah.
Because they lost at Soldier, lost to the
8 and 9.
Rams, lost to the Packers, and then the Bears. 8-9 is what I've got anyway.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, the official Unbelievable Podcast Vikings win predictor. 8-9 record for the season, which is just classic Vikings.
Yeah.
To go 8-9, but I don't think it's fair to, make a prediction of them being any better either. 7-9 last year. Clearly, some roster deficiencies needed to be filled in. They attempted to with spots. You got Patrick Peterson at cornerback. Got some a couple of good interior defensive linemen coming back. With Tomlinson, Michael Pierce. So there's reason for optimism, obviously, but I think there's still a lot of concern with depth, and I think there's going to be a point where an injury or two happens to key players, and the guys filling those spots are going to be, not up to par, and that's just how it works. I think the Vikings' depth is lacking. I think that will catch up to them quite a bit this year. I think if they stay healthy all the way through, with a lot of their key players, those big names, I think they can be a really, really a problem for the NFC, but it's just not feasible to think that. I think that's why the Vikings did so well in 2017. That's why the Bears did so well in 2018. They got a ton of injury luck. And then, if you don't have depth, it's going to be a problem. I think the Vikings don't have depth right now. So that's why I'm concerned. And that's the big red flag for me this year.
I think 8-9 is a good place to start. I believe I saw that the Vikings over-under was 9 wins this year, which kind of fits the bill. I think that this team could easily be a 10-win team, and I think they could easily be a 7-win team. There's just a couple things that need to go the right or wrong way. As a Vikings fan, pessimistically, I'm going to guess that they're going to go the wrong way, as they always have, right?
Yeah.
So I think 8-9 is a good place to start. I think you start building wins right now. There's a couple of guys out there that the Vikings could potentially sign. We mentioned Westbrook before. That name's been floated around. There have been other names as well. The Vikings could potentially add a little bit more like veteran leadership, or just they have about, $11 million in cap space now. They're going to do something else between now and the beginning of training camp.
I would think so too, with the cap space they just created with the Mike Hughes trade.
Right.
Getting rid of him, which I'm also curious. I would imagine they're going to go after a corner or a defensive back of some kind, because now
Bynum has the opportunity.
Your cornerback room is suddenly a little thin now with the whole Jeff Gladney uncertainty now. I think you still have your top three guys with Peterson, Dantzler, and Mackenzie Alexander, kind of your top three. But like I've been saying this whole show, if injuries happen, if any of those top three guys get hurt at corner, you get pretty thin there, and you have someone playing nickel that is very inexperienced, or you have someone in there on the field that is not super reliable. So that's the type of thing that I'm worried about, and that's just one example. But all across the roster, you have some good, A quality players starting. Harrison Smith, Eric Kendricks, Daniel Hunter, on the offensive side of the ball, Brian O'Neill, of course, Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook. At receiver, you have Jefferson and Thielen. There's all kinds of A quality players, but then behind them is where I get concerned, and I think the depth Vikings have is lacking compared to other teams. Excuse me.
Yeah, and that's fair. And at the same time, you could always count on the consistency of Kirk Cousins. Whether that bar is high enough for you or not. I think we're split.
Cousins will be Kirk Cousins this year. He'll be consistent. He'll get big stats. He'll win some games. He'll lose some games. It'll be just enough to keep enough Vikings fans on his side, and enough to keep a lot of Vikings fans against him. So It'll be classic. And then I'm curious, what the Vikings plan is now, because I did not anticipate them going in for Mond. We'll see what happens.
Right. It could be an interesting year. And like I said, you could potentially start this season 0-4. And what happens then? Is that when the fireworks happen? Remains to be seen. Again, you start building wins right now. Between now and training camp, a lot can happen. And of course, by the time you get to the end of training camp, we'll have a better idea of what this team is really going to look like, who the true starters are going to be, and who are kind of, the guys that we have our hopes up for, but not really ready yet, or maybe not quite the same player that we thought they were. So we'll continue to talk about those questions and try to give the best answers that we can throughout the duration of the off season here, as we start working our way towards mini camp, training camp, et cetera, et cetera. But that wraps up the draft. That wraps up our schedule preview. Any final thoughts here before we are done here for this week's show?
I don't have any, but I'm curious. Like I said, watch for what the Vikings might do with that extra cap space. They created almost $2 million with the Mike Hughes move. Um,
Mhm.
they
Why make
clearly
that
have
move if you're
something.
not going to do
They
something
clearly
else?
have something in mind there. So I'll be curious to see what that is.
There's no reason to trade Mike Hughes there unless you have something in mind. So
Yeah.
I'm with you. Keep an eye on that. All right, folks. Well, as always, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, wherever else you listen to your podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube, of course, if you prefer that medium of listening or viewing your entertainment for the week. And make sure to check out the rest of the Climbing the Pocket team on the Daily Norseman. They're doing a lot more than we are right now, especially because Drew and I haven't done a show in about 2 weeks because we were sick last week. So make sure to check out the work that they're doing. Player breakdowns and video analysis. I mean, audio analysis. They're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So make sure to check out what the rest of the team is doing. And we will probably catch you guys next week.